Hi guys, in today's video we're going to talk about an all too common problem, back pain. While the causes behind back pain are complex and multifaceted, there are some commonalities that you can see with people who have back pain. The number one issue that we would see in solace would be people's inability to be able to hinge through the hips effectively rather than hinging through the lumbar spine. Number two would be people's inability to be able to separate lumbar from thoracic rotations. Number three would be people who are stuck in aggressive lumbar extension, whose lats are constantly switched on and overactive, pulling them into a very aggressive position at the lower back. This also affects their ability to go overhead. Since the lats are scapular depressors, they pull your shoulder blades down. It makes it quite difficult to get the arms overhead, which also can lead to shoulder problems long term. Number four would be weak glutes. If you have weak glutes, they are your hip extensors, and if they aren't functioning well, what you'll find is that the lower back tends to contribute to that movement, creating lumbar extension instead of hip extension. Last but not least, number five would simply be being weak in your lower back muscles. A lot of people are a little bit afraid to tackle the lower back muscles, especially if there's a history of pain. But if you are weak there, more often than not, you're going to get problems down the road. So, how do we tackle those problems? Glad you asked.
This is your typical back hinge pattern that you see done hundreds of times every day when people are picking things up off the floor. Alternatively, what we look for is a hip hinging pattern where the back stays nice and flat and the hinge comes through the hip rather than the lower back. Regardless of which hip hinging pattern you choose, the common element is that the lower back remains flat. Slight forward tilt of the pelvis, shifting the emphasis onto the muscles of the posterior chain, namely the hamstrings and glutes, as well as the erector muscles in the lower back. For me, the technique that you choose very much depends on the object that you're picking up off the ground, whether it's more knee dominant or more hip dominant in nature.
This is a simple little drill that you can use to work on separating thoracic from lumbar rotation, making sure that your abdominal muscles stay nice and tight, hands up behind the ears, okay, and from there looking forward, trying to make sure that your belly button stays pointing at the roller, okay, and again creating that rotation, trying to make sure that the rotation comes from the upper back rather than the lumbar spine. Doesn't really need to be a roller, anything will do, just squeeze it between the knees, helps keep everything facing forwards as regards to that lower half. If you want to go with something a little bit more complex, which includes hip mobility, you can try a world's greatest stretch. A little bit more of a challenge in this one, so again what we're looking for on these ones is a push-up position. Foot comes up outside the hand, or as close as you can get to it. Squeeze your backside on your back leg, push that hip down towards the floor, hand comes across, little reach. The rotation here again, we're trying to make sure that it's the thoracic rotation, so we keep the belly button pointing at the floor. Back down, little toe and hip lift to finish off. Again, we look for a reach. Rotation, track the rotation with your eye, back down, toe and hip lift. If you look at the side profile of someone, you will notice for someone who is stuck in aggressive extension of their lower back that they've got quite an aggressive forward tilt of the pelvis, and again a more kind of chest out shape, okay, more commonly seen with females, also with guys, but you will see it more commonly with girls. This is one exercise that we can use to lengthen out the lats using some effective breathing strategies as well. So again, from here what we're looking to do, kneel on the floor. You can use anything in these ones, again, broom handle will do, okay. Again, I'm just using a roller in this instance. Elbows are up on a bench, okay, about that high. And what we're looking for in these ones is a little tuck of the tail, okay, trying to make sure we've got a relatively flat lower back, neutral neck, okay, and then then we sit back onto the heels, okay, or as close as we can get to it. From there, we're trying to take a nice big deep breath in and a full exhale. Keeping the exhales nice and aggressive. You can add in a little stretch for the long-headed triceps by flexing in from here as well. A simple entry-level exercise for strengthening up your anterior trunk would be a front plank, often executed poorly, so just make sure on these ones that we do make sure that we have a posterior pelvic tilt. When we're setting these up, we want to make sure that the elbows are directly underneath the shoulders, nice neutral neck, lumbar spine is neutral as well, a little bit of a posterior tilt at your pelvis. Okay, so again, directly underneath, we stare between the fists, little tuck of the tail, hold that tension in the abdominal muscles, keeping the hips nice and flat. Okay, you can hold these for time. Once you can develop up to 30 seconds or so, we generally up the level of it. Another effective strategy for lengthening out the lats and also getting in some shoulder flexion and overhead work is a back to wall shoulder flexion exercise. So from here, what we're looking to do is we shift the feet out a little bit from the wall. Okay, again, we look to tuck the tail, get that lower back in nice and close to the wall. From there, head is in contact, keeping that nice and neutral line at the neck. And what we look to do then is we try to get the arms nice and straight overhead, getting the thumbs as close to the wall as you can. Full exhale, bringing that rib cage down, and then back down again. Okay, if you want to make it a little bit easier, you shift your feet further away from the wall, a little bit harder, you go a little bit closer. Weakness in the glutes leading to excessive contribution of the lower back to hip extension is quite a common element. This is a very good example of that. When you see people executing any type of hip thrust exercise, what you often see people ending up in is a kind of a banana shape. Okay, so you'll see this type of element, which is a sure sign that there's a big contribution from the lower back. Okay, we're substituting hip extension for lumbar extension. Crucial element in these ones when you are doing these exercises is to make sure that you set up with a posterior tilt first, so tilting the pelvis backwards, tightening up the abdominal muscles, and then from there, as I get to the top, it's the backside that has to do the work to get me there, about 90 degrees at the knee. Again, set my pelvic tilt again, abs tight, and then you'll see that your glutes are forced to contribute more to the exercise, which is what we're looking for. Particularly for people who set up with a more posterior tilt, who have a very flat lower back, this can be a big element for them, making sure that the lower back muscles are strong enough to be able to tolerate the loads. So simple little exercise that you can do in these ones with no equipment would be to work into back extension.